out there having coffee, please come ahead and sit. So all the people at the end, we have more outlets for coffee. We have coffee outside as well. I request you all to either be seated or maybe just grab your coffee and enjoy the other conferences. If you want to be here, you can be here. Gentlemen, आप सबसे दरख्वास्त है कि जो लोग पीछे खड़े हैं या तो वो बैठ जाएं क्योंकि हम अपना कॉन्फ्रेंस स्टार्ट करने वाले हैं, या फिर आप अपनी कॉफ़ी इंजॉय कर सकते हैं बाहर भी. हमारे पास बाहर भी बहुत सारे आउटलेट्स हैं कॉफ़ी के. हम बाहर भी कॉफ़ी पी सकते हैं और अगर आप कॉफ़ी इंजॉय करना चाहते हैं तो आप बैठ Warm welcome to the World Dairy Summit 2022. It's our third day, and until now we have learned a lot of things about the other side of the story, about how milk is processed, produced, and delivered. But this time, now we'll understand the consumers' expectations. What are the consumers expecting? In this session, we will be understanding how the changing consumer expectations pose one of the most dynamic challenges facing today in the dairy industry. More and more customers seek organic products from smaller farms in pursuit of healthier food. Importance of dissemination of trustworthy information consistently to the consumer is an important part, which we'll discuss in this session. And once again, I want to tell you, if you want to watch the webinar live, you have this app that is IDF WDS 2022. So all of you can download that and spread the word. Our chair for this session is a Chief Executive Officer. She has been actively involved in IDF and other international dairy networks for many years. She's currently the chair of IDF Norway and member of the Standing Committee of Marketing. A big round of applause for Miss Ida, right here. This beautiful smile is Miss Ida. So we have seen our co-chair a lot in other conferences as well, Mr. Lauren Diamonds. A big round of applause for Mr. Lauren, who is the COO of French Dairy Board and IDF board member. A big round of applause for our co-chair. Our first speaker has an extensive knowledge of international dairy market and policies with over 30 years of experience in the sector, including USDA, Kraft Foods, Stellar Foods, and the publisher of the Dairy Daily Report. Let's hear it for Miss Mary. A big round of applause for Miss Mary. The next we have is the head of Edelman Global Advisory. He's the senior public affairs professional with diverse experience across sector, including journalism, finance, and technology. A big, big round of applause for Vasudevan. Our next speaker is the Chief Operating Officer at Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation. He has a good understanding of brand building, product management, export, advertising, and media cooperative planning, sales and distribution supply. A big round of applause for Mr. Mehta right there. Now, I'll hand over the mic to our chair and let's begin with the session.
Okay, we will also have Melissa Cameron sitting here at the end. So give her also a round of applause, please. So good morning. So my name is Laurent. I'm CEO of the French Dairy Board, CNIEL, as well as now a member of the board of IDF. Our session today, Consumer Expectation. I'm going to co-chair this session with Ida. She's not only my friend, she's also head of the marketing board, Dairy Marketing Board in Norway. So we are going to co-chair this session. So for those of you who came Monday afternoon at the World Dairy Outlook 2022 and on the session on global marketing trends, you could have seen that for the last 3 years, consumers' attitudes, images, expectations, behaviors have changed a lot during those 3 years due to the COVID crisis, but also due to acceleration on previous consumer expectation before the COVID crisis. One, climate change concern has been in a very high level at consumer expectations, and demand for sustainable products is now a reality. Second, animal welfare expectation is important as well, and demand for food that respect the animals is now becoming more and more an issue. And third, demand for local products or reassurance on origin of products is also an expectation. In terms of consumer expectation for the dairy products, we saw that the evolution of home meals have had a very strong impact. Change in eating habits have been a key element in those last 3 years, as well as changings in purchasing habits. Overall, COVID crisis have had a very positive impact for the dairy products, for the consumption of the dairy products, because our products are basic products first, essential products. They are inexpensive for all the nutrients they can bring. They are safe because most of the time there is a packaging. They enhance immunity. And of course, and during this period it was very important, they bring pleasure. The pleasure products have been highlighted during those years, and dairy products are for all members of the family. So the session objective today is to go deeper in those analyses, deeper in the consumer's expectation for tomorrow, and I think we're going to have a very interesting session, and our first speaker are going to be challenging by your question as well at the end. So thank you for coming. I'm going to give the floor to Ida, who is going to make the first presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and my name is Ida, and I am very happy to be here in India for the first time. It's a magical country, I must say. As you heard, we will be looking at consumer expectations from different angles. So we were looking at the global demographics, how that is important. We will look at the expectation of the global consumer when it comes to dairy. We will go into India. I know we are looking at some trends in India. And we will also be looking at labeling and how label is affected and perceived by the consumer. So I think we're just going to start off. And our first speaker will be Mary Lederman. And she's a dairy strategist from Rabobank. You've already been introduced. I do a little bit again. You lead a team of 7 analysts around the globe. And the task is to analyze development in the regional and global dairy market. And developing the bank's medium-term dairy forecast and advising the banker in the engagement with dairy industry. So this is the finance and the money that's going to speak here now. So we are very happy that you are here. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, and for the kind introductions to our co-chairs, thank you. To our host country, India, it's a real pleasure and honor to be here, and I'm very humbled to be asked to present today. So for those of you that are not familiar with Rabobank, it's one of the world's leading food and agricultural banks. In the Netherlands, Rabobank is that hometown bank, but outside the Netherlands, the company only invests in food and agriculture. We have about 105 billion euros invested in the food and agricultural space. Of that, about 25 billion euros is in the dairy sector. We work with 17 out of the top 20 dairy companies in the world, and we have a real key focus on growing a better world together. And Rabobank is originally a cooperative bank founded more than 100 years ago. As was said, I lead a team of 7 analysts around the world, and this is really what the Rabobank difference is. We have boots on the ground, whether we're in New Zealand, Australia, Europe, Shanghai, and South America and the United States, as well as 2 analysts in Europe. So this is my team, and what I love about working with this team is that if I ever get a question on what's going on somewhere, I just send the email to that analyst, and by the time I wake up the next morning, I have that answered. So I'm in a very lucky position. So my task today is to take a look at the world's dairy demand and supply going out into 2030. And not only will we look at the supply and demand, but I want to delve deeper into the changing demographics in the world and how that is going to drive different dairy product demand, and specifically products for an aging world. So Rabobank did this analysis on looking out on the global dairy supply. This was done actually in early 2019, okay? To put this in somewhat of perspective. And we're looking at 2020 dairy exports being about 85 million metric tons on a milk equivalent basis. And we see that the demand for dairy products over the next 10 years, so from 2020 to 2030, we looked at global trade increasing by 3% annually. And when you look at where that demand is going to be, it's largely driven by increased population and increased disposable income, okay, purchasing power. And of that 35 million metric tons, close to 2/3 of it is going to be demanded in Greater China, Southeast Asia, and then if you add up all of these buckets from Africa, it's also about 7 million metric tons as well, okay? So then the question is, who's going to provide that milk? And this was fairly easy in the past decade. From 2010 to 2020, the European community, which produces about 160 million metric tons, they eliminated their milk quota system. And so in the last decade, the European community had an exportable surplus that was much closer to 15 million metric tons. Our estimate in 2030 is that the European community will have less than 7 million metric tons, so half the amount of exportable surplus growth in this next decade than what they experienced from 2010 to 2020. And I would also caution that this 6.7 million metric tons is based upon a compound average growth rate in Europe of 0.6%. 0.6. And I believe at this time we're probably a little optimistic. Given the agricultural policies that have been forthcoming or suggested in the second half of this decade, we think it may be a challenge for Europe to actually maintain this 0.6% increase in milk production. Likewise, New Zealand is also facing constraints, and we look at New Zealand's milk production in 2030 actually being less than what it was in 2020. The United States emerges as the region of the world that is showing the most proclivity to increase milk production. Now, the US milk production is about 105 million metric tons, and our forecast is for it to grow by 1.5% annually. I've been working in this industry since the 1980s, and I can tell you within any decade you choose, the US has increased milk production by 1.5% annually over a decade, give or take 0.1%. So the key to the US further growth is plant capacity. So if there is a demand for the product, the plants will be built. You build a plant, the cows mysteriously show up to fill that plant up with milk. We see other potential areas of the world that could increase milk production. Again, this work was originally done in 2019 and 2020, and we actually show Ukraine as increasing its exportable surplus. That's very questionable at this time. Turkey entered the exportable surplus for the first time as well. But all of these numbers tend to be at a decimal point, right? They're not a real game changer. So when we look at this, Europe only up 6.7 million metric tons, New Zealand actually down, the US up 7.5 million tons. We put this all together and we have a gap. We have a gap of about 20 million tons that we really don't know where it's going to come from, okay? And so that's the real opportunity. When people ask me about plant-based alternatives or even cultured milk products, they're like, aren't you afraid of these products? And I'm like, no, I'm really not, because I see the demand for dairy proteins or protein in general so great around the world that we're going to need all the foodstuffs that we can get. So how is adding over 700 million people, according to the UN, how is adding 700 million people going to impact dairy demand? So I see Dr. Novakovic here, emeritus from Cornell University. This is kind of your basic economics class 101, and I'm kind of even nervous to present it in front of him, actually. So he'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we look at the dairy demographics, population growth, and then change in per capita consumption, and some of those key drivers in changing of per capita consumption is disposable income. And when I look at disposable income, I'm looking at that age group of 20 to 50. To me, that's the economic engine of a country. And when you're going to really increase your purchasing power, you're likely to have children during that time, and you're going to be more cognizant about what you're feeding your children. Also, changing consumers' tastes and preferences. I remember when I was in my 20s, I was probably eating more pizza than I'm doing now in this stage of my life, okay? So there is that changing consumer taste and preferences. Also, price expectations and the prices of substitutes that come into play here in figuring or estimating demand. So when we look at where the 705 million people are going to end up over the next decade, India is going to account for 120 million of that growth, okay? And then Nigeria is second, followed by Pakistan. But from India, it's like 120 million, and Nigeria is like 54 million. When I originally put this data together, what surprised me was that the United States actually shows up in one of the top 10 population growth regions in the world. What I've laid upon this as well is we've taken a look at our estimates on dairy demand based upon population growth, which is the blue bar, and then the orange bar representing the growth in demand based upon increased per capita consumption. So India is a culturally rich dairy country, and so we see not only the growth from population, but also through additional per capita consumption. In contrast, Nigeria hardly consumes any dairy. And so its total demand going forward is not as great as some of the other countries simply because it has a very low consumption. So we've taken off the blue line for the population growth, and now you see, here are the top growing dairy markets based upon population and per capita consumption, and you have India and Pakistan that are clearly the leaders here, okay? It's interesting to note that China population now is, in the most recent UN estimates, is expected to decline by 9 million people. So India by 2030 is by far the largest population in the world, and China drops by 9 million. What's interesting about that is when we did this analysis originally in 2020, we were using the 2019 population growth numbers out of the UN, and at that time the UN was estimating a 23 million increase in China's population between 2020 and 2030. They've now revised that down so that it's not increasing by 23 million, but rather decreasing by 9. So we know that India and Pakistan is going to try very hard to be self-sufficient in milk production, and Sudan is another country that will also be trying very hard to be self-sufficient. When you exclude Pakistan and India from the world markets here, China emerges, followed by the United States and Brazil, as the 3 key leading growth markets for dairy product production, okay? And you can see that China and the US are almost neck and neck, but they get there in 2 very different ways. The population impact from China is low, whereas the per capita consumption is expected to increase by 1.5%. Now that's not a big number a 1.5% increase in per capita consumption. You're talking about 33 kilograms per person going up to maybe 36 kilograms per person. In the US, we have the population growth. We're already a high level per capita consumption, and we see modest gains from that as well. Brazil, what's interesting about Brazil is that think about where Brazil is going to get their product. They're already a fairly large dairy producing country, but they are a net importer, largely from Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. So any milk production growth that we would have seen in South America is going to stay in South America. Okay, so that's the key takeaway from South America here. When we look at how the aging population is going to change, so in China, we're going to decline by 9 million people. But for the last 20 years, the dairy industry has been fixated on the infant formula market. Well, that ship has sailed. And what we really need to be thinking about is what we call the active silvers. That is people over 50 years of age. And from 2020 to 2030, China is going to add over 100 million people in this age category. 100 million people in that over 50 category, okay? My parents are 95 and 84 years old, okay? And their nutrition today is much different than even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. They are eating more dairy nutrients today. I mean, my dad was a dairy farmer for 60 years and he never liked milk, okay? But then I turned him on to chocolate milk from Fairlife, which has no lactose in it, and that is like his favorite beverage, okay? And at 95, he'll be 96 in December, he can drink whatever he wants. That's another, caveat in this age group. But it was interesting that my parents, who are dairy farmers for over 60 years, do not look at Fairlife as milk. They look at it as a substitute from some of the medical nutrition that was basically prescribed by their doctors, and they kind of like the taste of Fairlife better. So I think the dairy industry has a huge opportunity in developing dairy products, personal nutrition, aimed at bone density, aimed at cognitive health going forward. When you look at the United States here, we're adding 16 million people to the US population by 2030. Half of that 16 are going to be immigrants, and our immigrants typically bring their taste and preferences for products from their original home countries. And so there's going to still be demand for specialty products in the US. And when you look at the population here, it's kind of like we've got the baby boomers and we got the baby boomers' children. That's kind of, but we still have that growth in that 20 to 50-year-old category that's going to drive demand. Brazil, their population at that 20 to 50-year-old group, about 44% of the nation's population, it's stable, so it's not rising, it's not declining, but we see increased consumption there in Brazil, driving the demand for dairy products in South America. Mexico is a key export market, particularly for the United States, but for other countries as well. And we see that growth in that 20 to 50-year-old category in Mexico. I think it's also important to look at these charts and look at that less than 20-year-old group. And I know that we get fixated on school milk, that's an important category, but we have to be aware that the population in that under 20 group, which traditionally have been our largest segment for fluid milk consumption, they're evaporating on us, okay? So we really need to be pivoting and thinking about the dairy nutrition needs of an aging population. That category, less than 20, in each of these slides is lower in 2030 than 2020. Even in India, the number of people under the age of 20 declines by almost 35 million by 2030 versus 2020. India has that strong growth in that 20 to 50-year-old category, but it also has a strong growth in the over 50 category. So in India, you're looking at about 25% of the population over 50, 75% under it. Indonesia, another exciting market for the dairy industry, but their population under 20 is also declining, and it makes up about a third of their population. They've got the growth in that 20 to 50-year-old category, again, that economic driver, but also the 20 to 70-year-old group. It grows by more than any of the other categories. And then in strong contrast, you have Africa. So of the 705 million people being added to the planet during this decade, half of them are in Africa. And they're going to want to be fed, whether they're in Africa or if they leave Africa. And most of these charts here on Africa, you'll see 80 to 85% of the population being under 50 years of age. So it's a big difference in the demographics in Africa versus the rest of the world. Okay? So the other challenge with Africa is going to be affordability. And so when we look at the competitive advantage in milk production and how to have lower costs, raising milk production per cow and efficiencies, that is going to be really important for our industry to get right in order for us to feed or nourish Africa. So, in summary, India will be the largest milk producing and dairy consuming country. We see that there are going to be market modifications, and our panelists here will know more about where he sees the different markets in India and opportunities in the Indian market. China is going to be really interesting because even in the last 3 years, China has gotten more interesting. In 2017, at the end of 2017, we estimated that China was 70% self-sufficient, and their drive to increase milk production, even in the last 5 years, we estimate their self-sufficiency today at 80%. And so our reliance on China as the key destination for dairy products, we need to be aware that is moving. That is moving. And so China, to get into China, I think we're going to really be focused on the aging demographics. South America is basically going to take care of its own and keep all the dairy products there. The European community is a real wild card here, and it's going to really be dictated on their government policies, particularly in the second half of this decade, to see what role they're going to play in global dairy trade. But from the lenses that we are looking out of today, it looks like it's going to be a diminishing role. And then that leaves the United States, which has an opportunity to grow. There are places in the United States that there are very few people, and we have found where there's very few people, there's also room for more cows. It used to be that the United States, you had your milk production on the Northeast, the Midwest, and California in the West. And we've seen really in the last decade, places like South Dakota, Kansas, and Central Texas really spur as proliferation of the dairy industries in those regions. So the U.S. also has size and scale, and when you think about what could be a real disruptor in the U.S., could be the 10,000 cow dairy, or actually the 50,000 cow dairy that then is got a UHT plant in the middle, and next to it is the Amazon distribution center. So when we think about how people get delivery of their dairy products, that is going to be changing, and I think that COVID really leapfrogged e-commerce to a level that probably wouldn't have happened for maybe 5-10 years, but it really leapfrogged the adoption of e-commerce. So I'll conclude, and Thank you for the opportunity, and I welcome questions later.
Thank you very much, Mary, for your very interesting presentation. This population analysis puts our eyes on India, but India will not be the next speaker, but we are waiting for Jay and meta-analysis on the Indian market, but not now. Before we are going to think about trust, because for the consumers to continue to eat dairy products, they need trust for our products, trust for the companies, trust for the institution that deliver the messages on health, on nutrition, on sustainability. So please, a round of applause for Dr. Vasudevan from Edelman.
Thank you very much. Just by way of introduction, my name is Vasudevan. I head Edelman Global Advisory. It's the consulting arm of the Edelman Group. Edelman, of course, is the world's largest public engagement firm. We are spread across 65 countries in all 6 continents. And the Trust Barometer is, in fact, one of our signature intellectual properties. This is a survey that is conducted globally, and it is, in fact, released every year at Davos. Now, what trust the barometer looks at is really how do people trust institutions? How do they trust co-workers? How do they trust people? What we believe, of course, is that trust is equity. Organizations build this trust equity over time, and when they want to reach out to people, when they want to convince them, it is this trust equity which actually helps their messages resonate with their audiences. Just by way of a bit of an introduction on the Trust Barometer, it's now in its 22nd year. The current edition had over 36,000 respondents spread over 28 countries. Typically, we tend to do about 1,150 plus respondents in every country. So we're going to, what I'm going to do is very quickly give you an overview of some of the global trends in trust and consumer trust, and then, of course, spend a little bit more time on trust among Indian consumers. How do Indians trust their institutions, and how do they treat information? Because at the end of the day, all of us are in the business of information. We want to disseminate credible information to our stakeholders, to our customers, and therefore their trust in us matters a lot. Again, every year we typically tend to focus on one specific aspect of trust, and this year in the post-COVID world we've looked at the cycle of distrust, which is a slightly different way of looking at things, because in the post-COVID world, while organizations are trusted, there are also aspects that are engendering distrust. So we're going to explore some of these aspects. Now, one of the key things about India is that we are a very trusting country. Our trust in institutions is typically very high, and as you can see, India in fact ranks at pretty much the top of the trust table, and this is an averaged out trust that Indians have in different institutions, and the 4 institutions, of course, are businesses, NGOs, government, and media. This is an average of that, and we look at general population as well as elite population. So elite population would typically be well-educated, well-to-do, and what have you, and the general population would be slightly lower down the demographic scale, but India is a trusting country. Globally, and this is a global slide, and this is global data, businesses are typically trusted. Global data shows us that businesses typically have more trust, NGOs a little less, government and media not trusted that much. Now I'm just going to park it here. This is just by way of helping you to understand global trends so that we can also transpose some of India's trends against this. News is now becoming a bit of a problem, because news sources are not seen to be trustworthy globally. There is a decline in trust, whether it is in search engines, traditional media, owned media, and when we say owned media, it is assets that are owned by organizations, websites, your Twitter feed, your any of the other information that you put out on social media or other digital means. All of these, in fact, are not trusted all that much, and this is globally. Employers are trusted around the world. And you can see India is actually one of those high trust markets, 90, but we're going to revisit this in a couple of slides. But employers are in fact trusted a lot. So even among our organizations, when you look internally, and typically employees are also your best spokespersons. They are also the best purveyors of information among communities. If they trust you and if they trust the messages that you're giving them, they would be able to give that out to the communities that much better. Businesses and NGOs are seen as effective drivers of change. They're seen to be agents of positive change. So that's an interesting trust equity that organizations hold. And again, this is globally. We're going to look at India data. And this is really important because what we found is that good information can increase trust. What we found is that when people are not well informed, their trust is typically many, many points lower than when they actually have that information. So information is empowering. The more information you give out, the more credible information you give out, the more your consumers, your stakeholders are going to trust you. For instance, what we found is that even among lower demographics, when they are given information, there is in fact a 10-point rise in the trust that they have in institutions. So that's a very powerful agent of change that institutions such as ours can create. Now, let's come to the real meat of this, which is the India findings. In India, when we look at the trust that population, that our citizens have in institutions, again, this is the average trust, we look at both these demographics, the elite population and the general population. What we found is that this trust gap, the gap between the trust that lower demographics have in institutions and higher demographics have is actually coming lower. Some of the reasons, of course, is that in a post-COVID world, a lot of, there have been a number of government schemes, programs, that has actually helped build trust among, we would say, the traditionally slightly economically disadvantaged classes. They feel more empowered, they feel more supported, so trust in institutions has gone up. This in fact has reduced from the record of last year where it was actually very high, but this gap, if you actually notice, is actually not that much compared to some of the other countries in the world. So Thailand, for instance, has a 36-point gap. So the gap between trust in different demographics in India is fairly low. As I said, India is a trusting country. We trust our institutions. Trust in all institutions in India, whether it's business, NGOs, government, or the media, is very high in India. Now, of course, the trust in media has taken a bit of a dip, and we're going to explore that a little bit more, because a lot of times, while we would engage directly with our consumers and with our stakeholders, the media at times can be a fairly powerful engine to also take our messages across. So trust in media is eroding, and we're going to look at that. But I think the key takeaway here really is that the trust in businesses, trust in organizations is high, and that's a trust equity that we can leverage. Now let's look at information and how information is playing out and how information is being consumed. Fake news. Concerns about fake news in India, as in the rest of the world, are at an all-time high. People don't know what to trust. They don't know whether what they are reading is trustworthy or not. And India is one of those countries where concerns about fake news is in fact at an all-time high right now. Because of that, the trust in different forms of media is going down. Trust in social media has tanked. It's perhaps at one of its lowest in a very long time, and the simple reason is that when people go on social media and see some things, they don't really know whether it's true or not. It may be true fairly globally, but in India, it's coming out to be a very clear trend. Trust in owned media, that's trust in your own assets, your website, organizational website. Even that is dipping because consumers now are a little suspicious about whether the information that companies are putting out, organizations are putting out, is actually credible or not. Now, you may think of it as a challenge, but we would think of it as an opportunity, because that's the opportunity gap that you have, that credible information from your side can fill. Now, traditional media, and we look at traditional media as any media that follows a traditional editorial structure. It could be newspaper, it could be an online news platform, anything that has an editor has an editorial structure. India traditionally has trusted its media a lot more, right? We are a very newspaper-friendly country, but even there, that has eroded a little. We're going to explore that in the next couple of slides. But search engines have gone up. And the simple reason is that now when Indians see something, when they see information, instinctively they go to a search engine and they search about it, because that gives them a multitude of views. So for you to be present and to have your point of view across in many different platforms is very important. Now, and if there are any media colleagues in this crowd, this may not really please them, but unfortunately media in India is increasingly not seen as a unifying force. It is seen to be slightly biased one way or the other, and that is eroding trust in the media. That being said, there is trust in individual journalists, because journalists in India, as with many other countries in the world, are also influencers in their own right. They tweet. People follow them. People consider some journalists to be far more credible and trustworthy than others. Similarly, some platforms to be more trustworthy than others. Now, what does that mean for us, and what's the trust landscape for businesses in India? Now, scientists in India are actually the most trusted. And for this audience, I suppose that would be very important, because we are all experts in our field, right? All of you are experts in your field, and the voice of an expert in India is seen to be extremely credible. A completely, I would say, extreme example of that is that people in lab coats in India, if you ever look at Indian advertisements, sell everything from washing powder all the way to toothpaste. So anyone who's seen to be an expert is instinctively trusted. We as Indians lay great trust in technologists, in experts, in scientists. Increasingly, co-workers are highly trusted. Now, from even an audience perspective, when we look at farmers, and this was a completely different piece of research that we did, and we looked at what are the sources of information that farmers trust. It is actually fellow farmers. Farmers trust their fellow farmers to give them the most trustworthy information. It could be their family, who are also fellow farmers. It could be progressive farmers in their village. It could be village headmen. But they instinctively trust other farmers. They also trust business leaders. So CEOs in India are highly trusted. So when CEOs speak, when business leaders speak, they are trusted in India. Now, economic optimism in India is stable. In fact, India is one of those countries where economic optimism is traditionally very high. We feel that our future generations are going to be better than us. 5 years later, our lives are going to be better than what it is right now, and that really reflects in that. So when we go out with messages which talk about economic upliftment, which talk about economic betterment, that is going to resonate with our audiences in a far more effective way. Now, when we look at sectors, and this is very interesting, because the dairy sector would pretty much fall in about the food and beverages sector, right? Food and beverages as a sector in India is highly regarded. It is a trustworthy sector, and in fact, trust in the food and beverage sector in India has gone up. People trust the food that they eat. They trust the companies that are supplying the food that they eat. They trust the organizations that give them the food that they eat. If we look at the dairy sector, Amul, Mother Dairy, these are organizations that are trusted to give quality products, quality products and services to the population. I mean, they instinctively trust the sector. So this is an equity, trust equity that we have as the dairy sector in India. And if we look at trust in brands which come from other countries. Now, Indians, of course, trust our own home-built brands. We trust brands that are homegrown. We also trust brands from a number of different countries. Now this by no means is exhaustive, because unfortunately this was a question that was asked which only had so many choices. But countries that are originating in the West, whether it's the UK, Germany, France, Canada, the US, these companies who originate from there are highly trusted. Japan, practically as trusted as we trust ourselves. China, possibly not a big surprise to this audience, but trust in companies headquartered in China is at a low, and of course there are many reasons, and that's not something that we would want to get into right now, but it's a fairly intuitive guess as to why. So what can we do, and what's the role that we have in filling this trust gap? And in filling this trust gap, connect better with our stakeholders, connect better with our audiences. Now, Indian society does have certain fears. Job loss, especially in a post-COVID world, was a very real fear. That is abating now as the economy picks up and as economic indicators are rising, but climate change is actually one of the biggest concerns. And aspects around climate change, water, food, aspects around changing weather. We've had one of the hottest summers in decades in India this year, and so these are very real concerns in India. We've had floods in Bangalore this year, so these are concerns which are hitting Indians in a very personal manner. Now, institutions are also seen to be able to solve societal problems. This is the weight of expectations that consumers have on you. You are expected to solve this. So if there are issues in the dairy sector, you're supposed to solve them. You're supposed to solve them and then tell consumers that, look, we've solved this, don't worry about it, we've taken care of this. So it is for industry in collaboration with other institutions, whether it is NGOs, the media, even the government, to come together and to solve these and to take a leadership role and also to get results, because businesses are actually seen to be able to successfully execute. It's one aspect to, of course, talk about things. It's another thing to be able to deliver results. Businesses are actually seen to be able to do both those. They're seen to have the biggest role in solving societal problems. So in the dairy industry, it's not just about supplying high quality milk and milk products to consumers. It's about the overall upliftment of rural India. It's about the overall upliftment of rural communities. And here, consumers, of course, prefer brands. They prefer organizations that align with their beliefs, that showcase the fact that they're creating change in society. And of course, even from an investor side, that's increasingly becoming one of those indicators for investments. Leaders are expected to inform policy, not get into politics. So leaders and business leaders and organizations are expected to improve aspects such as education, healthcare, jobs, economy, do something about climate change, remove wage inequality, promote equality and equitable distribution of wealth among communities. These are expectations that consumers have from industry and from sectors. And of course, to be credible sources of information, because employers, institutions, major corporations are all seen to be credible sources of information. They're trusted to be sources of information, and it is for us to either build on this trust or lose this trust. Therefore, what are some of the factors? Information quality is the single largest thing. Credible information that is put out through your own channels, in what you speak to the media, in what you go out and talk to directly to communities, to farmer partners, to all of the constituents of the value chain and to other stakeholders is going to be extremely, extremely important. And just focusing on information quality and the credibility of information can have the largest impact, positive impact on consumer or stakeholder trust in you. Therefore, to cut a long story short, and I hope this wasn't a long story and I hope it was interesting, there are 4 key pillars that we can look at. The first is that organizations and businesses are trusted to deliver. That's the weight of expectations on you, and therefore it is for us to step up and deliver this. Leaders need to engage more. They need to shape policy more. They need to talk about the change that they want to bring about a lot more. And as leaders in this room, that is something that perhaps should be foremost. Internal communication is as critical as external, because everyone in your value chain, within your organization, are your spokespersons in the community. So if they know and if they trust what you're saying, they'd be able to get the community on the side a lot more. And of course, the last but not the least, provide trustworthy information and provide it consistently. This is not a spike, a flash in the pan that you do it once in a while. You have to be at it. And that's something that can help bring consumers on your side. It's something that can help nudge consumers or stakeholders or farmers in the right direction. Information at the end of the day is key. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think that when I see these slides that you show us, these things you want to emphasize, I think this also is very relevant to the rest of the world. I don't think this is only happening in India. I feel that even in Norway, far north, we are experiencing very many of the same things. So the challenge might probably be to find how to get the quality information in good channels, because people are not trusting the social media channels. And so that's going to be the challenge for us that communicate in the future, how to spread the message. Okay, we are moving into our third speaker, and I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Jain Mehta, and he's the CEO of Amul, and is also part of the committee I am in, the IDF Standing Committee on Marketing. And Jain, I just have to say, you have the most prosperous last name I can think of, because we are all talking about the metaverse. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Mehta himself.
Thank you so much. I never expected this. Okay, it's good afternoon, all of you. And thank you, IDF, for this invitation. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be talking here in presence of two distinguished chairmen, experts in their respective field, and I see a lot of other distinguished panelists here and all others in the audience. The topic, the chairman has already mentioned some of the key expectations of the customers. So, sir, I hope I'm not repeating some of the points which you just mentioned in the introduction. Over the last 2 days, we've been taking a lot of pictures of the slides. So I thought I'll make the task easy. In case you don't have my contact details, just scan this card. At the end of the presentation, if you like it worthwhile, just say hi. I will send across this PDF to you on your WhatsApp or your email so that you don't have to take pictures. And I hope that you concentrate on the presentation and we discuss some of the points that I have missed out in this particular presentation. Moving on, I'll share some of the Amul experiences and Amul story of how we have been trying to fulfill the demands and needs of the customers. Over the last 2 days, we discussed the volume of milk India is going to produce. We discussed the production systems. We discussed the farmer support. We discussed various issues related to production of milk. And now, as the leader in this particular category in the country, it's our job to market this milk, meeting the requirements of the customers. And the more profitably we do it, the better it will be for our milk producers. The Indian dairy scenario is known to you, but I'll just capture it in one single slide. In world produces 900 odd million metric tons of milk. India is about 1/4 of the world. Organized sector is about 20-25% of the total India's milk production. And Amul is about 10 million metric ton, which is 25-27% of the organized sector. Now, as India's milk production continues to grow, more and more milk comes into the organized sector, and Amul, as an organization, we are trying to expand. So all this is going to lead to a massive, massive jump in the availability of milk that India is going to give to the world, and what Amul will also get an opportunity to handle it. To just put it in a very simple way, 2/3 of what the world incremental milk production over the next 10 years world is going to produce is going to come from India. When India moves from 210 million metric tons to 335 million metric tons, it is going to be 1/3 of the total milk in the world. And we at Amul have very ambitious and aggressive plans to increase and strengthen our hold in the Indian market. This is a slide, let's not get by the numbers, but what I want to present here is that a lot of milk is still flowing into the unorganized sector. So with the pandemic, we saw the shift from the loose and unbranded to branded and packaged milk. Now, when more and more milk comes into the organized sector and more customers are buying packaged branded milk, there is an opportunity for brands and trusted brands to actually gain more momentum and higher market share. And that's where Vasudevan's presentation comes in very important. If consumers trust in brands like Amul, Mother Dairy, Virka, Vijaya, Avin, Hudson, whatever, all the trusted brands will benefit into the shift, and the dairy industry and the organized dairy industry will grow at a much, much faster rate. Mary, the Tetra Pak milk market is not so large in India because our market is more of pouched milk, and that's going to grow. Pouched milk, packaged milk is going to grow at a much faster rate than anything else in our country. Just a couple of slides on Amul. We handle close to 27 million liters of milk every day. We collect it from 3.6 million farmers. We are the 8th largest dairy in the world with 41 million liters of day processing capacity per day, and a turnover of $8 billion US, growing at a very, very healthy rate of 16%, making us the largest food brand in the entire country. And Vasu, let me tell, we are also the most trusted brands in the country. The large part of our business, almost half of our turnover, comes from the 34 million packs we supply and sell from 95 dairy plants across India, and that's why we say Amul Doodh Pita Hai India. We also do close to 2.5 million tons of cattle feed every day, which is supplied to the farmers. We have more than 50 products, 1,050 SKUs, and 1 million retail outlets which are directly serviced by us. As per IFCN, we have been ranked the 8th largest in the world. The top few are the Dairy Farmers of America, Fonterra, Lactalis, all working across countries or multiple geographies, whereas we operate largely from one single province of India, which is Gujarat. So that's the kind of opportunity of growth that we have to get into the top 5 in the coming few years. We are also the 3rd largest brand being picked up from the shelf, which is 6 billion times as per the Kantar report. Actually, we do close to 15 billion packs every year. So that's the kind of volume, velocity, and momentum of a package of milk that is sold across the country, and that's giving us this huge number, which is basically large number of consumer interactions. Mary Rabo ranked us as the 13th largest dairy company in the world based on the sales turnover. And Brand Finance UK has ranked Amul as the top #1 strongest brand, dairy brand in the world. So with this, the journey of last 75 years in just one slide, when we started in the year 1946, to setting up national distribution network, getting into umbrella branding, selling of ice creams, focus on milk marketing, focus on direct Amul retailing, leveraging the brand through fresh products, and also now sourcing about 20% of the milk comes from the different parts of the country, and we have great ambitions for the next decade and more. The business philosophy of Amul is very simple. While private companies try to maximize the bottom line by keeping maximum profit for itself, we deal with 2 major aspects in our business. Value for many, because we deal with millions of milk producers, and value for money because consumers believe Amul, as the most trusted brand, gives the best quality product at the most affordable prices. So we do exactly opposite of what a normal business would do. We buy the raw material at the highest price, sell the finished goods at not the price which is the highest, and we work with very low margins, very low costs, very low overheads, trying to maximize the benefit, and that's why more than 85% share of the consumer's rupee goes back to the producer, which keeps him happy. Consistency in product is one of the key things. Most of the companies do value engineering by reducing the cost, changing the ingredients, replacing milk fat with cheaper fats, and doing all sorts of tricks, trying to reduce the cost to maximize the profit. We focus on giving only the best ingredients to our customers so that the customers blindly trust Amul wherever they pick it up from. And like, for example, the Amul butter in the market for more than 6 decades has the same taste, same recipes, and same applies to our cheese, our ice creams, and all our dairy products. And the kind of product range we develop is to meet the requirement of every member of the family across all occasions. And Mary did mention about the age groups and the time evolution. Both as an organization, we evolved by creating products depending upon the changing times, and also developing product range depending upon the different requirements as per the human life cycle segmentation. So this is what has been the constant thrust area in our growth story, and the kind of innovations in products that we do, kind of launching 2 new products every month, more than 200 in the last 5 years. And that is what is going to continue to drive growth at this. So given this opportunity that we have, in the next few minutes, we will look at what are the opportunities we try to develop. We are an $8 billion organization. If we want to double up our growth in the next 5-10 years, which are the areas we need to focus on? What is the consumer requirement? How he or she is changing? And what we as a brand do to try to meet that changing requirement? I'll talk about 10 specific trends. Trend number 1 is the power of protein. I remember having attended an IDF conference, my first conference way back in the year 1999 at Athens. There I heard a scientist talking about milk, cheese, whey, and so on. So the scientist said that today when we use milk to make cheese, we eat the cheese and throw away the whey. A day will come when we will make cheese but throw away the cheese and use the whey. This is the time, after 20 years, we realize has come to be true. Protein has started gaining immense momentum in the country. This is Google search on the word protein over the last 3 years. Protein deficiency also is an area which a country is looking up to because of changes and expectation because of protein's role in increasing immunity thanks to the pandemic. Even protein versus calcium searches are showing that protein is showing a huge spike, which means this is the time which the country requires this protein. Now, we are India's largest cheese and paneer manufacturer. And the kind of volumes we handle, if we are processing, say, 3 million liters of milk into cheese and paneer every day, we have close to 2.5 million liters of whey every day. Now, how do you make this whey into a very, very affordable whey protein for the masses of the country? And that's why we launched these new products over the last few months. And this has been gaining very good response from the customers. And we realized that giving good quality protein at an affordable price in a tastier format to the customer and thereby replacing what India is right now focusing on, imported whey protein isolates and concentrates from different parts of the world, this is our answer to it. We are thankful for IDF to have recognized this and giving us this Dairy Innovation Award. But let me tell you, this is just the beginning. We are working on a range of protein which are day-to-day, everyday consumption items, be it a cookie or an ice cream or a yogurt or a shake or a protein bar of chocolates. We would like to supplement your daily requirement of protein, which is equivalent to, say, 1 gram per kg of your body weight, through tasty, healthy Amul products at an affordable price, so that you don't have to look for alternate protein sources. And so this is the range of products which is coming very soon. Theme number 2 is focus on immunity. I don't need to tell much about it because pandemic brought about this big change in our mindsets. And that's where all the conversations over the last 2.5 years have been around how to boost our immune system. Dairy and milk have played a very, very important role into this. And we did meet up the expectations and the changing expectations by launching a range of drinks and a range of products with immunity boosting ingredients. And I'm sure you would have tried some of these at the milk bar next door. Third big trend for the customers, and this is very, very important for the Indian customers, our obsession with sugar. I mean, we eat everything sweet, we like everything sweet, and that's also having a health hazard in future. But now we are seeing a lot of people shifting away from sugar. Sugar-free substitutes are also gaining acceptance, and we are trying to get in a portfolio which has a sugar-free alternative in every single product that we have. So be it the chocolates or be it cookies or ice creams or mithais, sweets, the sugar-free range is gaining importance and trying to change as per the changing requirements of the customers. Moving on to the next big thing, which is again, I think, a global trend which is coming to the country, which is movement towards a clean label. People want a clean lifestyle, people don't want complications, and we want simple, clean label products. Milk, of course, is the cleanest of all labeled drinks that we have. Same is the case of butter, same is the case of paneer. Most of the products that we have are very, very clean in label. But if you move into very, very special items, natural items, and less processed items, there's an emerging trend and a requirement of different types of cheeses. I mean, we are trying to get into a big range of Gouda, Edam, Cheddar, Feta, Emmental, all different types of cheeses, trying to sell it in fresh format, and also working on a lot of Indian varieties of natural cheeses, which are getting great acceptance now, and trying to create a market for it nationally. And same is the case of ice creams, which is the pillar of our strength. If ice cream and the growth in the market share is the real milk, real ice cream claim. Butter cookies, our butter cookies have real butter, which is 25% butter and not just 2-3% butter with the competitor sales, and same is the case of cheese cookies. We also sell bread, which is not made with Amul butter and not vegetable oils. So these are the kind of real ingredient offerings we are trying to project in the market and create a differentiation in the minds of the customers. The fifth big trend in India, which you heard Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Home Minister also speak about, is the demand for organic. It is seeing a very, very huge growth in the country. People want food without pesticides, without any artificial support given to the plants to grow them. And once you move towards from fertilizer, pesticide products to natural products with focus on natural and organic farming, the market opportunity is bound to rise. And we have got this space because we are owned by millions of our farmers. We have launched organic wheat flour. We are in the process of launching organic pulses, organic rice, and a whole range of organic products, basically directly working with the farmers, setting up mechanism to have organic testing labs, and creating a market for these products so that the consumers get the benefit of best quality products and, more importantly, at affordable prices, and thereby democratizing organic, which is currently a very, very niche and a premium segment in the market. This is where the taste and the excitement comes in food, and the industry that we are dealing with, people love things which are not normal. So apart from the mundane products that we consume, the love for the exotic is getting mainstream. We are into food space, we deal with food service, we deal with a lot of chefs, and people, we have seen a changing trend in requirement of exotic items in the minds of customers. What do we do and how do we be a part of this? We launched a range of single country origin dark chocolates, getting the chocolates from the best regions of the world and branding in the essence. So we have a Peru, Venezuela, Tanzania, Colombia, all the chocolates of the different parts of the world. We have a camel milk, which is one of the exotic, but one of the healthiest drinks in the market. We launched honey, which is single flora honey, not just honey, which is a mixture of all different types, but all different single flora honey that we have launched, getting acceptance in the market. And basically trying to be global and local and launching a range of exotic coffees from different regions of the world and trying to meet these changing requirements of customers. This is another category. We had a session at IDF yesterday on how do we make milk more popular in the variety of forms depending on the species which produce these milks. So we have a range of pure buffalo milk products, we have a range of pure cow milk products, we have a range of camel milk products, be it ice cream, milk powder, cheeses, and so on and so forth. So this is one category which is appealing to the niches. I'll not talk about A2 here because that's a big misnomer and myth here, because India has more than 60% of milk which is buffalo milk, which is naturally A2. So tomorrow if A2 becomes a global trend, India will be having the best position in the world to cater to that changing requirement of the A2 demand also. This is one category which again is a very, very important thing, the probiotic range. And we started working on probiotics way back in the year 2005-06. We launched the world's first probiotic ice creams, and we have probiotic buttermilk, probiotic lassi, and different sets of products. But we realized that this is not good enough. We need to really, really make probiotic affordable to millions and millions of Indians. And there cannot be any better product than the Amul buttermilk that we sell in the market. We sell close to 2 million liters every day in peak season and about 1.5 million liters every day around the year. This Amul buttermilk sold at a price of about 20-22 rupees per liter is now probiotic, which means we are providing probiotics in a most affordable and the best possible delivery manner to all the customers across India. And these many, more than 10 million servings every day is definitely going to make India much more healthier, much more stronger, and a much more immune country in the years to come. So this is our latest offering, and this is our latest thing which we are going to do, which is going to be a game changer in the Indian market. Moving on to the second last trend, which is the fresh Indian sweets. Indians love sweets. With the pandemic, people started trusting less of the halwai-made sweets, which were sold in the loose form, not very, very convenient to buy and not very trusting to consume. So we are moving into a range of more than 30 different Indian sweets. We can add as many more products as possible because we are manufacturing at 95 different locations across the country. And all these products come free from adulterants, using the best quality milk, best quality khoa, and a longer shelf life, but not very long so that people think it's stale, about 30 to 45 days shelf life, made closer to where you manufacture it, and it is gaining very, very good acceptance in the country. Moving on to the excitement in the food and the unexpected combinations people look forward to. Food is as much about Instagram today as much as about eating. So if you try to develop products and which excite the young generation, I think our job is well done. And we are moving into categories which will excite in a new categories which you never expected Amul to be. It's a carbonated drink space. We launched True last year, which is a blend of dairy with fruit, real fruit, and a carbonated drink and a colas without phosphoric acid. I mean, trying to make food very healthy, very interesting, and acceptable to the youth of the country. And moving on finally to servicing of the market. Amul has one of the finest distribution networks in the country, 1 million plus retails serviced directly. But today, with the changing number of products and the changing behavior of the customers, we need to be directly in touch with the customers. We were, of course, among the first Indian brands to set up a cyber store way back in 1990s. But today, with more and more consumers moving into this space, we have also set up our own D2C sites, B2B sites for trading dairy products, and Amul card for selling to retailers, Locate Amul app for helping customers find out where the Amul products are, and now our own D2C platform, which is shop.amul, in which we are able to sell a variety of products. And soon, if you are from Bombay, you will get mithais delivered right from our plant at Taloja to your doorstep in Bombay on the same day. So this is the kind of short delivery mechanism we are trying to implement, because we are present in 95 dairy plants. We have 80 branch offices, which means 250 warehouses. So our physical distributions is actually 4 to 5 times bigger than Amazon and Flipkart put together. So we want to leverage that, and along with the strong distribution network that we have, a vertically integrated farmers cooperative right from cow to consumer with multiple transactions all happening on a common standard platform. We are able to be very, very responsive in changing the meeting requirements of customers by communicating with our plants and getting the same support on the other way, right from cow to the consumer. And this is where this digital integrated supply chain is going to pay very, very huge dividends, with multiple tools available with us, directly connecting the producer and the consumer, and the entire supply chain is very tight, vigilant, and cost conscious. To summarize, these are the 11 trends which I mentioned initially: the power of protein, the focus on immunity, the moving away from sugar trend, clean label trend, the demand from organics, the love for the exotic, species-based dairy products, probiotics, fresh Indian sweets, combinations which are unexpected, and focusing on rise of D2C to directly meet the changing requirements of the customers. And finally, in words of Dr. Kurian, our founding chairman, we have traversed a path that few have dared to. We are continuing on a path that still few have the courage to follow. We must pursue a path that even few can dream to pursue, yet we must, because we hold in trust the aims and aspirations of millions of our consumers. Thank you so much. I look forward to your questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jayan, for your presentation. I mean, many Indians speak very fast, but you are the one who speaks the fastest. So I hope everybody understood you. I understood you because I know you for many years, but you speak very fast. Thank you for this very nice presentation about your fragmentation of the market and your products. Now the next speaker today is from Australia. It's Melissa Cameron. She's head of nutrition in the Australian Dairy Board, and here in IDF, she's the chair of the Standing Committee on Labeling. So please, a warm welcome. You okay?
Thank you for having me here today. I'll be talking today about the impact of labeling on consumer behaviour. So we've got some key messages today, and we'll touch on some of the spaces around food labelling and the information that's provided, the interaction the consumer has with food labels, consumers and nutrition information, what do they want, how do they want it, how are they using it, and then I'm going to touch on some dairy examples for you all. But as I'm going to touch on and share some of the examples from Australia, I thought I'd just set the scene with Australia. And we can't compare to Amul. We only produce 8.6 million litres of milk in Australia. We're 26 million people, and majority, 98% of our households consume dairy every day. We do export 32% of our dairy products. Now, food labelling has a really critically important job to help consumers make informed food choices and decisions. Food labels help protect public health and safety by displaying information such as dates, ingredients, allergens, instructions for storage, preparation, and advisory and warning statements. But along with this, there's also formatting requirements prescribed by law, there's marketing and branding information, there's price, and there's also a growth in other labelling systems, such as our front-of-pack nutrition labelling, environment and recyclable labelling, and also environment labelling. So these food packs are really, really busy places for the consumer to make a decision. The consumer's interaction with the label is really brief. So the consumer goes to the supermarket, and research suggests that the shopper takes on average 12 seconds to select a food item. And now with our move to COVID and online shopping, consumers are taking only 5 to 10 seconds to actually choose the food product that they want by looking at the label. So their ability to review all that information and make an informed decision is brief and challenging. Balanced with that quick interaction, consumers are trading off multiple messages and factors in their decision making. The top criteria informing their decisions is really consistent around the world, and it includes price to determine affordability, branding and marketing information to determine quality, promotional offers to inform value for money, taste and cultural factors also inform the purchasing decisions. So additional information on food labels often has limited value in changing purchasing decisions and behaviours, as they're quick and they're informed by experience. So what about the nutrition information and label? So demographics do play a role in people's overall interest in health and nutrition. So if you're a parent with a family, or if you're older, you have different needs and you actually engage with the food product differently. Consumers are more interested in this information with some products and not others. So nutrition information is actually less relevant for people when they're making decisions about fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh meats. There's also reservations from consumers when they're choosing indulgent or treat products. They don't tend to want that information. However, products where interest in nutrition information is high is in those processed products, those products that have multiple ingredients and where transparency is difficult and the consumer needs that extra support to make decisions. So today we'll explore if nutrition information and labelling is actually helping or hindering the consumer's decisions and behaviours. To stem the increasing incidence of non-communicable diseases and obesity, front-of-pack nutrition labelling has been around for about 30 years now. There is a plethora of systems working to attempt to convey a message to consumers about what is healthy and what is not. There's a real surprising degree of consistency in consumers' interest in nutrition information and their actual interest in getting this from the food label. They really recognise the link between food and health, and they really do nominate the food label as the place where they want this information. The World Health Organization considers front-of-pack nutrition labelling to be a form of simplified nutrition information, which really serves as an important policy tool to promote healthy diets through facilitating that consumer's understanding of the food and then making healthier choices. But it also has another role. It actually, these front-of-pack nutrition labelling is designed to, encourage food industry to actually reformulate their products and make them healthier. But in practice, front-of-pack nutrition labelling has been designed to allow consumers to understand at a glance and in a simplified form what the overall nutrition quality of the food and to make a within-category choice. However, to date, research really indicates that there's minimal impact and effectiveness on the diets of consumers. Supermarkets have reported that if front-of-pack nutrition labelling is rolled out on nearly all products within certain categories, consumers are more likely to use it. But with Codex developing principles for front-of-pack nutrition labelling and Europe looking at a harmonised system, the commitment to rolling more front-of-pack nutrition information out around the world is strong and will only continue to grow. In Australia and New Zealand, we have the Health Star rating system. It's voluntary and it rates the food on energy, saturated fat, sodium, protein, sugar, and a fruit, vegetable, nut, and legume content. It's designed to compare within products, so breakfast cereal compared to breakfast cereals, and rate that healthiness of the food in line with our dietary guideline recommendations. Due to the unique nutrient matrix of dairy foods, dairy's managed to establish its own categories and its own algorithm within the Health Star rating system. Our system remains voluntary. However, our government has set up targets for it to be rolled out on pack in certain product ranges. We recently underwent a 5-year review and the outcome was promising and better for yoghurt. We saw quite a significant improvement in recognition of the science for yoghurt. However, this was not the case for cheese, and unfortunately we have cheese still scoring very poor, and when consumers see 1.5 to 2-star cheddar cheeses and can then compare it with a 3-star or 3.5-star packet of crisps or a pizza or meat pie, it's not a good message to the consumer. So more needs to be done our government has recognised and committed to doing more once our dietary guidelines are reviewed in 2024. A recent study in New Zealand looked at the effectiveness of Health Star rating labels on making those healthier food purchasing decisions. So the Nielsen HomeScan data collects data from 2,500 households. Now, surprisingly, maybe not to us here, they actually found no direct impact on that Health Star rating label on household food purchasing. So it did not improve. They did not choose products that had a higher Health Star rating. However, because its Health Star rating system's also driving reformulation, and we've also got some other initiatives in Australia to reformulate foods, they did see a slight reduction in key nutrients of concern. The research maybe interestingly recommends that the Health Star rating should be mandatory. Pleasantly and very good education programs need to be delivered with Health Star rating systems, and they also recommend adopt additional nutrient warning labels. So overall, consumers like the idea of simplified labels and front of pack signposting that indicates the healthiness of the food. But when they go shopping, they have limited time to decide. So the upfront simple logo is supposed to be the best. However, they do find it difficult to interpret various nutrients, ingredients, and of the product. Nutrition information can make the consumer also feel coerced and pushed to make decisions that they don't quite want to, and this is creating some consumer resistance. And we've seen from our research that currently front of pack nutrition labelling is really having no impact on purchase behaviours. But because the consumer gets, they get busy and complicated labels, they often get ambiguity, multiple messages, they can feel coerced, and they're trading so much multiple information in their decision making. Now I'm going to step into a topic that's been discussed across the week here, which is the labelling of plant-based products. So while a small number of plant-based products have long coexisted in our marketplaces, the last decade has seen a significant increase in the number of plant-based products labelling and marketing themselves as alternatives to dairy. These products have a wide variance of functional and or nutritional suitability to dairy. The plant-based products have extended beyond promoting themselves as alternatives to milk into yogurt, ice cream, butter, cheese, and many other products. The marketing and label of these products in Australia is creating consumer confusion. In Australia, the issue is that most of these plant-based products do not resemble cow's milk or the proposed dairy product from a nutritional perspective, nor the standard of identity designed for dairy products. However, they claim to be suitable alternatives. The labelling and marketing of plant-based products with dairy terms, values, images, or comparison nutrition and health claims implies unique dairy properties or nutritional equivalents of the plant-based product with dairy. Research in Australia, commissioned by Dairy Australia in 2020, has looked at the main reason why consumers buy these alternative milks. And sadly that they're buying them, like 50% of them are buying them because they believe them to be healthier. So this is despite these products having, very varied nutritional ingredients, properties, or credentials and health outcomes. So while consumers' motivation for the plant-based alternatives are many, they also include some of the digestive, taste, and a little bit of the environment. When we looked specifically at attitudes to alternative milks, we also found some surprising information around the fact that nearly 40% of consumers thought that plant-based products were more natural than dairy or cow's milk. And cow's milk is a single ingredient that you cannot get more natural. And plant-based products, despite this, have additives and have quite a high level of processing to mimic that appearance, taste, and functionality of dairy. And maybe down the bottom you can see there that 20% of consumers thought that alternative milks actually contained cow's milk. Now in Australia we have still a fairly small range of products that are marketing themselves as alternatives to cheese and yogurts. And despite these products being classified as junk foods or discretionary foods with little to no nutrients, no nutritional fortification, more than half consumers who purchase these did so because they believe them to be healthier than the dairy option. These products, using plant-based terms, are really conveying a plant-based health halo. Collectively, this undermines the ability of the consumer to make an informed purchase decision and unfairly disadvantages dairy. The Codex General Standard for Use of Dairy Terms provides us all with very clear guidance for the use of dairy terms, and I encourage government regulations to look at these and get better alignment. Increasingly, consumers are citing sustainability as being an important or very important in their food and drink choices. Here in recent research in Australia, 63% of consumers actually said that it's important for their food and drink choices. But is it actually transitioning into action? Recent research by Ipsos in France for the French Dairy Association looked at this. They looked at the 3 most important purchase drivers. And it really aligns with the research that we've talked about to date, that taste, price, and the type of the food product were the 3 top purchase drivers for the consumer. And the environmental credentials actually fell at the bottom. So only 10% of consumers ranked those as being important. So we're not currently seeing a movement of consumers to make food purchasing decisions based on the environmental credentials of the food. So I'll leave you with some take-home messages today. We've seen that labels are busy, consumers' interaction is brief, and from our work with numerous labelling systems, it's critically important to follow some of these messages. Our labelling must be aligned and evolve with the evidence base. It must be truthful, accurate, impartial, and not mislead consumers. We must also recognise the dietary contributions of dairy, nutrient-rich dairy foods, and consider those health benefits of consuming those whole foods and not just those individual nutrients. We must provide meaningful information to the consumer, and also there's quite a significant growth in that off-label information, and we need to sort of help the consumer and recognise the QR code, websites and point of sale as spaces to get information. And any labelling system should be sort of supported by education programs to enable that consumer to choose healthier, balanced, dairy-rich, sustainable diets. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Melissa, for giving us this oversight and your thoughts on this. We are running a little bit late, but we are thinking that maybe we could have 5 minutes more because there's nothing going on here now and it's only lunch. So whoever wants to leave, of course, please do. But we just want to ask a few questions to the panels before we finish. And Laurent is also going to help me out here, so I'm not going to be alone. But I think at least I'm going to try and start. So Mary, you told us about the aging population, right? So I'm just realizing I'm into that aging population, which is very, don't
You're
feel
not
that good,
alone.
but that's how it is. But do you think so? And as a marketers, we talk a lot about Gen Z, the young people. That's all the change in behavior, the way they communicate, all the new channels, the metaverse, everything coming on. And of course, that's important. But do you think we have too much focus on that? Should we look more into the older, elderly generation and focus and also, think more about them?
Yes, I do think we need to think more about them. Keep in mind, this is the generation that grew up with dairy. We're not fighting against this generation. And the Gen Z, I've had 4 kids. I've watched how their diets have changed. The choices that they make from 20 to 40 years of age have changed as they've had children. So I think it's normal for people to go through dietary phases, perhaps. But I think we need to be cognizant that over 50 dietary phase can be really long. And hopefully it's very long. And I think that we've put a lot of emphasis on early childhood nutrition. And I think it's time that we put more emphasis on aging nutrition.
And I guess also this new age group of plus 50 is very different from the age group of plus 50 like 20 years ago. So we have a very different demand, would you say? And our drivers and barriers are very different from what they used to be.
I'm not familiar with that previous older 50 crowd, so maybe I just think with the longevity, that's, you know, there's a lot of things that go to expanding lifespan. And medical nutrition is one of those, and being more cognizant about nutrition as you age. I think that's different today for my mom at 85 than it was 20 years ago for her mom at 85.
Yes, that's right. So I think you are right. I think we also should talk more about this. You know, we can, of course, we have to focus on the young people because that's the prosperous new generation, but we also maybe need to talk a little bit more about the aging people. I know at least if I get into an elderly home at one stage, I still want my cafe latte, and I don't get that at this stage. So over to you. You talked about how to communicate and the trustworthiness. So what do you think about, because you talked about we're losing trust in channels. And so what would be your advice about which channels, if we have, let's say we have good qualitative, scientifically information that we want to communicate, which I'm sure a lot of us do emphasize on, but it looks like it's a little bit difficult to come through to the consumers.
Sure.
So what would you say about that? What would be your advice?
So I think that's going to be a great question, and thank you for that. It's a complicated answer, because the channels that you use are going to be very specific to the audience that you want to connect with. And we've researched channels across different types of stakeholder groups, and we found wide variations. For instance, what we found is that people who typically tend to work in policy-making circles, they tend to want a lot more physical engagement. So they like more seminars, they want more conferences, they like to be shown things, they want to be invited, they want a more participative engagement. We've seen the youth, the Gen Z, to be far more, to consume content and information far more on digital channels. Yeah. And that could typically be, depending on the types of information that they're searching on, can go, in fact, the biggest platform is actually WhatsApp. It's not Twitter, it's not Instagram, it's not Facebook, it's actually WhatsApp. Because there it's peer shared information, and peers are one of the most trusted, so that becomes an aspect that they look at. Farmers, we've seen again, WhatsApp is highly prevalent. So the channels can differ from I would say audience to audience, but the general trend is more towards digital. It's less towards the older traditional methods of sharing information, and depending on, of course, the type of audience, the platforms can vary. So it could be WhatsApp in one, it could be Twitter, let's say, among some urban audiences and what have you, but it would primarily be more digital now.
Okay. So, and that means there's a lot of, much more diversity maybe in how you choose your channels. I just say from my country, to reach the younger people, we cannot use Facebook and Instagram anymore because they're not there, they're moving on. But to again go to my generation, that's when you use the Facebook. So you have to kind of be on top of things all the time to understand how it goes, I would imagine. Laurent, if you want to join in here, please do.
I think
come on.
we can ask, maybe if the audience has questions.
Oh, maybe we should have the audience too, not only me talking. Oh, this is...
Is there any question?
If anybody wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone. Okay?
Okay. There is a question over there. If you could
Somebody's
bring the
coming.
microphone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentations. I just wanted to connect what Vasu said and what Mr. Mehta, you elaborated. Those are some fantastic 10, 11 trends that you're following. But one common thing that I picked was most of it is what consumers are demanding and then Amul is responding to. But I wanted to actually leverage what Vasu said in terms of building trust, and because corporates and businesses have that high ability to actually shape trust, why not shape consumer demand also towards more healthy and sustainable diets? So I was wondering if there is something explicitly that Amul is planning to do to shape the consumer trends rather than only following them.
I think it's a good question. What we as brands need to be very, very conscious of, that consumers are smarter than the organizations. Okay, so it is better to be having a pulse on what the consumer's sentiment to consumer requirement is, as much as what the technology and the brand capabilities are to match that and meet that expectation. There are certain things which we have done, which is a very subtle way of actually nudging a customer towards a particular product category. We can't be shouting on the roof and saying, hey customer, please do this. Okay, so this is a balance we as a brands have to learn to be, though we may have the best possible technologies, we can't force upon the customers. But when we know where we are the wherewithal to do it, we will gently do it, give that benefit to you even without your knowing it. And like probiotic buttermilk is a case in the point. Not a single customer asked us to do. But we realized we as a brand have an excellent delivery mechanism to reach to a 10 million households every day morning for your daily fix of immunity drink. So this is the way we would nudge you to do so. We know you consume protein powder, you buy black dabba of black whey protein, mix it with milk or water or juice or whatever and have it. We will have the way with us, we will convert into a chas or a lassi or a ice cream for you and give it to you. So this is the way we brands do it. We have to be very careful not to show that we are smarter than you. Second, the trust part is not just the product which we sell to you. It is the entire cooperative model, talking about farmers, how cooperatives benefit the farmers, the conversation of consumers helping the farmers through consuming their products. This is all is woven in the Amul narrative. You must have seen our running the Manthan ads. This is Amul the Taste of India ads, the product-centric ads. These are very subtle ways of weaving the entire story without being on top of it. I mean, we don't want consumers to buy a cooperative brand out of charity. We want you to pick up a product because you like it. It is great tasting product. It is affordable to you. It is available next to you. And that's why you would take pride in consuming an Amul or a Mother Dairy or a Verka or Vijay or a Nandini brand, and not just because their cooperatives are working with millions of farmers. So this is the balance we need to strive, and taste, of course, is the most important part of it.
Thank you. Oh, there's another question in the room. You have the microphone.
Yes, I have a basic question that why are we seeing that a lot of variants are coming into the market regarding these, nutritious milk, etc., but they do not go down to the, rural segment or to the last mile. They are basically much more, connected with the niche sector or with the middle classes, maybe because they basically because, the proteins or nuts and content, and basically because of the pricing, etc., or the packaging. So basically still, we find that the rural segment still is very much consuming that ordinary milk that is sourced, and still these, variants are not spilling over the last mile. So how?
It's a very good observation as well as feedback, because that's where the challenge of a conventional distribution channel lies. And market penetration, of course, people think starts from with metros and mini metros and goes to rural CD class towns and all that. So agility of distribution and supply chain matters, and that's where large organizations play a role. But we also find it challenging that to find a customer of an Amul protein buttermilk in a rural area is very, very difficult, or a Amul camel milk powder or an Amul 99% dark chocolate. Okay, so that's where the e-commerce channels help us. I mean, when we sell Amul protein on a D2C channel, we know there are 50,000 customers. I know each and every customer by his address because he comes directly to us, and we know there is a demand coming from Bhavnagar to as much as Deoria in somewhere else, or Ratlam, or even Guwahati or Bombay or Bangalore, and so on and so forth. So there is a demand coming across. The modern way of buying, which is e-com, modern trade, is helping us reach out to customers in a much faster way. Amul parlors is another way of our reaching out to large number of customers, because 10,000 Amul parlors are there. At least customers know that whatever new product Amul comes in, he will find in an Amul parlor. So these are the channel we need to have a leverage on to reach out to customers, irrespective of the geography of our country. I mean, we have 500,000 rural areas. We have an objective to reach out to directly to each of these markets. And we have a great team sitting here. Maybe at the end of the presentation, I'll introduce our team sitting here. They have been doing this fantastic job of making Amul products available across the length and breadth of the country, and exactly as you mentioned, meeting the requirement of the customer wherever he or she is.
I think that I just wanted to ask Melissa the last question because we are running out of time. Unfortunately, I think that we could have been there for a long time. Melissa, you have been giving us some challenges when it comes to food labeling. But isn't it true, especially when it comes to the health food labeling, isn't it true that these kind of labels just helps the consumers that are really good in health and very conscious about health being more healthier or better? And the ones that we want to reach when it comes to health concerns, we don't reach with these kind of labels. I'm very generic when I say this, but a general one.
The short answer is definitely yes. I think these food labelling systems are really designed by government and policymakers to actually, shift the food industry to sort of reformulate their products and sort of provide products that are healthier. Whether I fully support or agree that's another challenge, because we know all milk, cheese and yogurt is healthy and delivers positive health outcomes. But yes, the consumer that is healthy and interested will utilise these systems, but the consumer that's not will avoid them and not utilise them at all. So, and it has a big cost impost for food industry as well to continue to roll this out. And I really am challenged by how busy the label's becoming with all the additional labelling requirements that are being set up and will continue to grow in the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years. It's a real challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe a last question in the audience? Yeah.
No, I think they all want to go to lunch. So I think we just have to say a big round of applause to our excellent speakers. I hope you all enjoyed this session. And I think you will visit something afterwards. And you will say something at the end? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much to the delegates for imparting such information. That was insightful. And now we would like to call our chair ahead. And we want to share some mementos with the speakers. So I want our chairs to stand here and just share our mementos. I'll take names and you can share the mementos. Just come ahead and share the mementos with them. Let's hear it for Miss Mary Ledman, please. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking our time and giving us some information. Let's hear it for Melissa Cameron. Thank you, ma'am. Even after not being well, you were there, standing, giving us details. A big round of applause, please. Let's hear it for Mr. Vasudevan. A big round of applause for Mr. Vasudevan. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this seminar. Can we hear it for Mr. Javin Mehtab? A big round of applause for him also.
Sanjay Bhai, Mitesh, thank you all.
Now I would request our Senior General Manager, Dr. V. Shiridhar, to come on stage. Thank you so much, sir. We want you to felicitate our chair. Let's hear it for Miss Ida. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being a part of this conference. We are so blessed to have you all here. Can we hear a big round of applause for Mr. Lauren for being here at the end moment? Sir, sir. Sir, we want you again. Let's have you in the picture. Thank you for being such a lovely audience. I hope you had a lot to take away from the webinar. A big round of applause for being such a lovely audience. And we want a group picture with you. We want all of you to come in center. And we'll take a picture. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.